For most people getting into real estate, residential is a natural path to take. After all, it's what we're familiar with. Most of us grew up in a single-family home or an apartment building, but in reality, it's not the greatest investment. The cash flow is often lower, the asset's appreciation is based on what your neighbor's place sold for, and it's just not that scalable. Commercial real estate solves all of these problems, and that's what I'm here to teach you about today. The following is a snippet from a 60-minute presentation that I gave on transitioning from residential to commercial real estate. If you'd like to access that full video for free, check out the link in the description below. Excited to be diving into this with you all today. We're going to be doing kind of a beginner's guide to transitioning from residential to commercial real estate. I tried to jam pack as much information in this as we possibly can. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's talk about the pros and cons of residential. It's most people's first entree into the world of real estate investing. It's got a lower barrier of entry, right? I mean, houses, you can find them for $150,000. There's a much larger prospect pool, which I know a lot of people are far more comfortable with. It's easier to find tenants, or at least seemingly easier to find tenants. However, and I know this may be a little bit contrarian, I would argue that residential real estate actually has a higher vacancy risk. And it's not because it's difficult to find tenants, it's because they're single family homes. And if you lose a tenant, you have 100% vacancy day one. So for that reason, I think it's a higher vacancy risk. Now for the pros and cons of commercial real estate. So it does have a higher barrier of entry. Most properties, $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million to start. I'll show you today that that's not always the case. I've got a case study on a property that we'll talk about that I bought for $430,000, and that was here in Nashville. So it is possible to do commercial real estate the same size as some of the houses you all are buying. Most of the properties that I have, and I'm sitting in a 28,000 square foot office building that I bought back in 2019 that's 100% occupied, have longer term leases, 3 to 5 years. Sometimes you'll even get 7 or 10-year leases. I love that because we sign the lease, tenant pays their rent every month, and we don't have to worry about it. You actually have a lower vacancy risk because of the longer term leases and the fact that these are professional businesses. If you screen them correctly, then those tenants are probably going to be there for a long time. I've got some tenants that were in this building for 10 or 15 years before I bought it, and they're all renewing their leases. And then of course, it is less consistent in economic downturns. Let's break apart each of those because it's not always true, but sometimes it is. Cost of commercial property is higher, and the learning curve is rather steep. The cost, of course, is one thing, but the biggest thing that I've found, if you have the knowledge to pull these deals together, it's the same as in residential real estate. If you know exactly how to get creative with commercial deals, price doesn't really matter. I know guys that are closing 10, 20, 30, $40 million deals that don't have any money. And it's because they have the knowledge to go out and find the right deal, tie it up, and then bring the right people together. So as long as you know enough about commercial real estate, you don't need to have any money to do it. And of course, there's this, good old boys club kind of atmosphere around commercial real estate a lot of the time. I think that is, at least today, that is now more of a bad reputation instead of a truth, because I think commercial real estate has really changed over the last 5 years. You've got a much younger group of people that are moving into it. It's becoming more democratized. More people are talking about commercial real estate instead of keeping it close to the vest. So I think commercial real estate's changing. But you can get creative with deal structures as well. And you can also start with easier commercial assets, right? The learning curve is steep, but there are assets out there that are very similar to residential real estate or have a very similar process to follow, or just less of a learning curve that you can take to make your entrance into the commercial industry a lot easier. You don't need to be a part of the club. I am covered in tattoos. I've got a beard. I'm not your typical guy wearing a button down and a suit doing commercial real estate deals. So higher profitability potential. You've got actual professional tenants. With professional tenants, that means that these businesses care about their space. The way they care about the property, they care to make sure that they stay in good standing with you, because if not, it's going to impact what makes them money. So take Starbucks, for example. They pay their rent on time every month. They take care of the property on their own because they have a brand image to uphold. They're not going to let anybody get in the way of that brand image because they know they're not going to sell as much coffee if it looks like a dump or the building's falling apart. So they actually spend a lot of money maintaining their own spaces. And of course, the triple net lease, everybody loves this one. If you're not familiar with the triple net lease, the 3 nets in commercial real estate are common area maintenance, property taxes, and building insurance. What does that mean? Well, tenants pay their pro rata share of those expenses every year. So, in a single family home situation or even a multifamily situation, you as the landlord collect all of the rents, You pay out your property taxes, you pay for your building insurance, you pay to maintain the property, and then whatever's left over, you net. Whereas in a triple net lease, if my property taxes go up, if my building insurance goes up, which a lot of multifamily guys are seeing that all over the country right now, or if, let's say it snows and ices a bunch and I have to put a bunch of salt out, my common area expenses go up. I, as the triple net landlord, pass those expenses directly on to the tenant so it doesn't affect my bottom line. Makes it a much more stable investment cash flow wise. So this is a property I was telling you about earlier with regards to forced appreciation. This is actually the building that I'm selling here in East Nashville. But when I bought it, we bought it for $435,000 and we went under contract, I think with like 60 or 90 days to close. And in that time period, I went out, found a tenant, signed a lease, and the building, because we had the lease, tenant hadn't moved in, we hadn't touched the building yet. Because we had signed a lease, the building appraised for $650,000. So we got $220,000 in equity day one, just because we inked a piece of paper saying a tenant was going to move in. So the major shifts in going from residential to commercial, biggest things really are running the numbers and underwriting. If you're already buying multifamily assets, you're doing something that is way more difficult than commercial real estate. So you're already kind of ahead of the curve there. You just got to get the commercial real estate knowledge. Transaction timelines are entirely different from residential. Due diligence and financing are very different as well. So let's dive into those and pick them apart. This is a screenshot from one page of one of my underwriting spreadsheets. And I know that this looks very overwhelming, but it's actually really easy to follow. All of these, blue sectors here are pretty much where I input data. And then this just spits out everything that I need to know about it. And it helps because when you get into a multi-tenant situation, you get into a scenario where you've got all sorts of different numbers. Like I've got investors I've got to pay. I've got cash on cash returns that I need to calculate after a refinance. Things like that you can't really do that math in your head. You could do that very easily on a single family home. Can't really do that in commercial real estate. So while there is a bit of a learning curve here, it's relatively easy to figure out once you realize like, oh yeah, I just need to plug in specific numbers here and move the spreadsheet around a little bit and figure it out. Typically takes you around 14 to 30 days to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement. I know that's very different from residential. Sometimes you can have a contract in less than 24 hours. That's typically not the case in commercial real estate because everybody has their own attorney. There's no such thing as TAR forms or, Association of Realtors forms. When it comes to commercial real estate, you can use them, but nobody does. And then closing is about 30 to 60 days. So your typical time from starting to go find a deal to actually closing on one typically ranges from about 134 to 300 days, depending. This is the due diligence checklist that we use as we're going through this process. If you want to download this, you can get it for free, tylercobble.com/resources. But this shows you the amount of items that go into due diligence on the commercial side. Don't let it overwhelm you. I know that it's a lot, but when you have everything written down and you know what to be looking for, it becomes very formulaic. So let's talk about some of the easiest commercial real estate assets to get started in. I love outdoor self-storage units. So not the indoor climate controlled, outdoor, very simple, very straightforward. It's similar to multifamily. A lot of people love to say, oh, it's like multifamily, but I don't have to fix the toilets. Like, yeah, that's actually pretty true. They might have lighting in them. They usually don't. It's basically an aluminum shell, give or take. Demand has been steadily increasing over the last 5-10 years, mostly because apartment complexes are actually getting smaller. People are moving into smaller and smaller spaces, which means they're putting their stuff into storage. Most of these are very modular. You can pick them up and move them around if you need to, or very quickly disassemble them and move them on. So if you wanted to treat it as kind of like a covered land play, great option there. Multi-tenant strip centers. They have very favorable lease structures. Typically, retail tenants are signing longer term leases because they don't want to move. Like we're looking at Jamba Juice and Jimmy John's. They don't like moving. Because once their customers know where they are, once they've put all of the money into branding that space, once they know that, their employee base can easily get to that location, they don't like to move. So they're probably going to stay there 5, 7, 10 plus years. And of course, they're typically signing triple net leases, right? So they will sign those leases where you don't really have to cover any of the expenses. It's very easy to take advantage of forced appreciation, right? I mean, you just sign a new lease at a higher rental rate per square foot and your building is suddenly worth significantly more. The great thing about multi-tenant strip centers too is that even smaller assets justify property management. Typically, these leases are structured in a way to where property management fees are covered in common area maintenance, meaning the tenants are actually paying for their property manager. It's not coming out of your pocket. And then of course, flex industrial. If you've been following my YouTube channel, this one's been blowing up. We've made a few more videos on it just because everybody's loving it right now, but this is in very, very high demand. Flex industrial really caters to the Amazon-proof or recession-resilient businesses. Of course, you could have pickleball courts and podcasting studios in there, but they traditionally catered to your mom and pop plumber, your mom and pop electrician, anything that needs like smaller office and a bit of warehouse attached to it. A lot of e-commerce businesses actually love flex industrial because it's very easy for them to kind of operate, ship, manufacture, whatever they need to do in there. And the supply is actually dwindling. It is not being built as much as it was, 7, 10 plus years ago. So these tenants are getting pushed out and they need somewhere to go. So if you can get some flex space, it will stay full. All right. I know I kind of blew through that, but I had a lot that I wanted to make sure that we got to in the amount of time that we had allotted. Appreciate you guys.
Now, the most complicated part of the process and the one that I probably get the most questions about is how do I actually underwrite commercial real estate deals? So check out this video here so that you know exactly how to run the numbers on your investments. I'll see you there.